This week, Rob Allen from ThreatLocker is with us to discuss info stealers, vulnerability and patch management, and EDR. And then the crew will actually discuss Meshtastic, a brief history, some overview, use cases, and showcase some of the gear that we use for Meshtastic. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Your company runs on Google Workspace, but it's an afterthought for most security tools. Material Security is the first and only platform purpose-built to protect Google Workspace, securing email, data, and user accounts from advanced threats. From blocking sophisticated phishing attacks in Gmail to preventing unauthorized app usage and fixing risky file sharing in G Drive, Material continuously protects your data. Don't settle for second best. Protect Google Workspace with Material Security. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Material Security. And I am here today with none other than Rob Allen, the Chief Product Officer over at ThreatLocker. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here, my friend.
It's good to have you, man. It's funny. We were talking about gadgets and stuff before the show, and then we were talking about it's choosing your keyboard is very akin to choosing your operating system. It is a very personal choice. There is religion, there's everything involved in your choice, and you will defend that on the internet in comment sections until you die.
Well, yeah, you can also feel dirty for using a particular type of clacky keyboard. I do. I have a constant guilt over it. I regret it a lot of times when I'm pretending to concentrate and talk to the person I'm talking to, and all you can hear is clack, clack, clack in the background.
Yeah, right.
And as I mentioned, I am somewhat of a Apple fanboy, so I'm very fond of my quiet, nice.
The quiet key. Yeah.
But look, each to their own, really.
So it's interesting as we look at the desktop usage, right? I think the data that you've collected in the enterprise, Linux adoption is still very low. I think on the like end user consumer side, it's seeing an uptick because of Windows 11 and Windows 10 being end of life and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, obviously, everybody, it's unfortunate a lot of people kind of need a gun held to their head to update to the newest and best. So we are seeing people now, a lot of customers are updating from 10 to 11. But I mean, obviously, a huge proportion of the endpoints that we protect are Windows-based. I mean, it's pretty much Windows number one by some distance, Mac number two, and Linux will be a third.
Linux seems very important, though, to the people that run Linux. If they have it, it's very important to them. Which
it's
sense, right?
Unbelievably so. Yeah. I mean, in terms of number of endpoints, the amount of time and effort and work that we're putting into Linux agent development it really doesn't make any sense. But in terms of importance to the people who want it, it's way up there. So it's one of those things. From our perspective, it's basically you have to do this. There's no way around doing this. So luckily enough, we've been doing it now for a couple of years, so we're somewhat prepared.
Right. Do you collect any telemetry or data on like the threats against each operating system or things like that? I know it's hard for us cybersecurity companies to collect data, right? Because you want to protect our customers' privacy and their data, but we could learn a lot from that data.
Yes. Now, you have to bear in mind that fundamentally, because of the approach that we take, which is to deny by default, we don't really have to know what's good or bad.
Mm.
We don't really need to. We're fundamentally not depending on decisions about this is good or this is bad. So we don't really need to collect that sort of information. Now,
Oh,
what I
right.
would
Yeah, you
say,
don't need to build a signature database. You leave it to the customer to go,
this is exactly
this
the
is
point.
this
This
is
is exactly
probably
the point.
bad, right? Yeah.
Again, we're
Mhm.
basically blocking everything, whether it be, good and weaponizable, or, coupon clipper or remote access tool or ransomware or malware. I mean, we're blocking it all by default.
Right.
So as I said, we don't really need to collect that data. Now, what I would say is that there is a huge amount of information and valuable information in the data that we do collect. So, I mean, we log on average somewhere between, I think it's probably now 10 and 15,000 rows of data per machine per day.
Mhm.
So network activity, file reads, writes, executions, everything basically that happens on the machine, pretty much we log and store. Now, we did previously, effectively all that information was 100% siloed. So, organization A information was in their database and organization
Mhm.
B information was in their database. And there was no sort of central location where we could see trends or get information about things. But we did actually introduce a new product a new enhancement to a product back in Zero Trust World in February, which is what we call Insights. So Insights is kind of a central database where we gather information about things
Mhm.
effectively from lots of different environments, from millions of machines. So we can see, what an application typically behaves like, what it does, what it calls, what
Oh,
its
I see. Yeah,
dependencies
yeah.
are.
Right. Yeah, because
Um,
the more data you can collect, the more you can normalize it and go, oh,
absolutely.
I might have seen it in organization A, but now if I'm seeing it in 80% of my other organizations and no one's
Correct.
reporting a huge incident against it, yeah,
Yes.
that helps.
It helps us give people information to make educated decisions. I mean, fundamentally, we want people to make educated decisions about, should I allow this thing to run in my environment? So if we can
So do
tell
I
them,
get something in the product, Rob, that tells me like if I'm looking at a process, it goes, hey, by the way, it's like an upvote, right? Like,
well, that's
80% of
perfect.
ThreatLocker customers have given it the green thumbs up,
Absolutely. We can
Yeah.
we can tell you how many, what proportion of machines it's running on, what it tends to do on different machines. Does it reach out to the internet? Does it have dependencies?
That's so
Um,
useful because that takes I feel like sometimes that takes a long time to go search on the internet to figure out
it's
if
very it's virtually impossible. I mean, you search for
yeah.
a process name on the internet, you're going to get 50 pages of
Oh
garbage.
my god, it's terrible. I've
Yeah,
been there. Yeah.
absolutely. It really is. But again, if we can, as I said, gather that information centrally, obviously completely anonymized, so there's nothing specific to any organization in
Right.
there. But if we can
Also
say,
faster than reverse engineering it. You can
very much
certainly
so.
say that, right?
Yeah, very much so. But I mean, the ultimate aim for us is, one of our components is what's called ring fencing. So ring fencing allows you to control what applications are allowed to do.
Mm.
So stopping them from calling other applications, stopping them from accessing your data, reaching out on the internet, all that kind of stuff. But the idea of Insights is we're going to be able to give people very specific, tailored ring fencing policies around specific applications. So this is how Teams normally behaves. It normally doesn't call any other Windows components. It obviously reaches out to these domains, these IP
Mhm.
addresses, etc. That's expected. Doesn't typically need access to files. We'll be able to say, well, look, here's a really tailored ring fencing policy based on data from millions of endpoints, where you can say, right, this is normal behavior. We're going to allow that normal behavior, and anything outside of that normal behavior, we're going to step in and stop it. So there's a bigger picture there, but as I said,
Yeah.
there is gold there. There's valuable information there. There's things that are happening, or in a lot of cases, things that are not happening across our customers' environments that is useful for other customers to know, and that's why
Mhm.
Insights is now a thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It ties in nicely to, mention the ring fencing into info stealers. I just, was digging into info stealers with some folks recently, and and I think you pulled up some more data points when we were talking, Rob, and you were like, "Oh yeah, it's like all the reports are info stealers are up by 20%, 30%, whatever it is." And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of interesting." I gained some great insights, on them, but it's they're popular because my thought was, and here's my basic reasoning why we're seeing this is PCI did a great job protecting credit cards. Threat actors had to pivot. Ransomware is a pretty good way to make money, but it's kind of noisy. So what if you were to just steal the data and exfiltrate it, and it turns out that campaign and activity is now called info stealers, and what they steal is called the log. And I was like, oh, well, okay, this all makes sense now. But from your product perspective, or from your personal perspective in product, like this is something that's going to keep happening that we just need to keep defending ourselves against.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's the same as any malware, really, insofar as an info stealer is just a program. It's just software.
Yeah, right.
As you said, it's probably in the grand scheme of things quieter than something like ransomware. It's less intrusive. It's less destructive. It's less attention grabbing than something like ransomware. And you could have an info stealer running on your machine for years, realistically, and never know about it. And it's just sitting there quietly, grabbing information, grabbing data, credentials, etc., and sending them out to, or sending the logs out to wherever. So it's a quieter way of doing things. But I mean, fundamentally, the data that's there is incredibly valuable, which is why they do it. So it's a real problem. As I said, we've looked through some products. Give you information that's pulled from the dark web. I mean, there were stories recently about billions and billions of records. I mean, which effectively is just a data dump. Somebody took all the different things and put them together. That's, and unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that gets attention in the national news. People are looking, 50 billion records are
it has to be a big number that catches people's attention.
Has to be a big number. Yeah, it has to be a big number. But again, they don't really make much of a fuss about the fact that it could be info stealers sitting on tens of thousands of machines right now, or hundreds of thousands or millions of machines right now, just uploading small amounts of data, little bits. Here's my credentials, or here's credentials for this website or that website. And again, all that data combined is extremely valuable.
Right. And that's hard to detect and prevent. If they're being stealthy, they're living off the land, and they're taking small bits of data and just trying to throw them over, the internet in probably multiple different ways to not get caught. This is kind of concerning, right? I think that's why we're seeing an uptick. It's probably successful for the attackers.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, look, much like anything, they're evolving, they're changing. It's not the same. There might be, if you're basing your decisions on signatures, on knowing bad things. I mean, I don't really look at it too much, but I can imagine that the, say, Luma info stealer, for example, that hasn't stayed the same for the last 5 years. They're constantly changing it, adjusting it, amending it, improving it, much like fundamentally any software company. I mean, a lot of these gangs are, effectively professional organizations. You know what I mean? They've got teams of developers, they've got management, they've got support. The support
they've got like, in some cases I've read they have an HR department in health benefits.
I would well believe it. I mean, they're big organizations, so I would absolutely well believe it. I mean, in a lot of cases, their support is better than some legitimate software vendors. I mean, the support that they will give you when you get hit by ransomware to tell you basically, well, this is how we got hit, this is how we got in, this is how we did it, these are the things you should do to not happen in future, and, pay us whatever, we'll get you back up and running again. I mean, it leaves a lot of legitimate vendors in the shade.
And as far as detecting it with
other guys.
Yeah, right. But detecting with Threat Locker, it goes back to those rings, right? Where I can say, this is what the program should access in terms of other processes. So if it's trying to reach out in the browser, or maybe even do things, surrounding the browser, I can catch it there. It's obviously going to access data and then send that data off. So there's ways we can say, well, why should that happen? Like that's anomalous. Right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, generally speaking, it's typically a program. It's a piece of software that's going to try and run on your machine. And there's two ways to try and stop that. One is to know all of the pieces of software that are bad, which is, quite frankly, a constant
I've been down that road. It was easier to whitelist and say what processes are good and then inspect everything else. But there was still a lot of false positives in that. What was that called? Was that called the whitelisting? I want to say like Endpoint anti-malware 20 years ago was... the big thing was the whitelisting approach.
I think the politically correct term is allow listing.
I think you're right. You are right. Yeah. But I was recalling it from my memory from before when that's what we used to call it, right?
Absolutely. And so did we before we got given out to quite severely on a few occasions. But no, look, the concept itself is not a new one. The difficulty is it has always been an extremely heavy lift. Organizations have struggled to implement it with the tools that are available to them. I mean, I've spoken to organizations, in fact, one was a very large one, not on this side of the pond, that got affected by a cyber attack recently. And they had spent, when I last spoke to them, they'd spent over 4 years trying to implement allow listing using Microsoft's built-in tool.
Sure.
And they still hadn't turned it on. Just
Yeah.
couldn't manage it. It was effectively unmanageable for an organization of their size. So the challenge has always been making it attainable, making it achievable, making it possible. And the concept has always been a brilliant one. But can I actually do this in my organization? Can I allow people to do what they need to do and no more? Can I allow them to run what they need to run and no more? Can I allow their programs to do what they do, but not step out of line and eat your lunch?
Well, I think it was a very binary. It was a very binary approach. It was allow or block, which in the case of ThreatLocker, I've got options, right? I can still let things run, do certain things, but not other things, which I think is really the
there's
crux
layers
of the
to it.
features.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, the beauty of the approach that we take is we take a very simple principle, which is we want to change the paradigm of endpoint security from default permit to default deny. Now, again, there's layers to that, because default deny can mean different things. It can mean just block everything that isn't explicitly allowed from running. So stop ransomware, stop malware, stop info stealers from being able to run on my computer. But we also expand on the principle to other areas. So, okay, what things can do when they're running? You know what I mean? PowerShell is a brilliant example, because PowerShell is often used in ransomware attacks. I mean, it makes sense if you're a bad guy to use it because it's on everybody's machine,
right?
And it can do so much. It can run remote code. It can exfiltrate data. It can download and execute payloads. It can do so much with it. I mean, we've been playing around recently with just some, I can say some scary examples of PowerShell, how PowerShell can be used, but like screen grabber, a PowerShell script that runs on your machine that takes a screenshot every minute and uploads it to
Microsoft calls that recall, don't they?
Yeah, that's a whole thing. Do you know that there's actually even aside from recall, which is a security and privacy nightmare, there is a feature built into pretty much all versions of Windows, which is effectively a keylogger on the subject of info stealers. And do you know what it's called?
No, I don't.
It's called Getting to Know You.
Oh, how creepy.
Isn't that really creepy? But Getting to Know You in Windows is basically a keylogger.
I feel like that's Clippy going, you didn't want to get to know me before, so I'm going to get to know you now, and I'm going to change my identity. I'm going to steal your keystrokes, and now I know
it's really scary. And it's something that basically everybody should turn off on their machine. But the problem is most people don't even know it's there, let alone how to turn it off. Now, again, we've got a product called Configuration Manager. We've got basically turn off this keylogger as one of our configuration manager options. But again, it's the mind boggles how they have got away with it for so long.
Well,
and again,
I think that's also why info stealers are probably pretty popular today, is you can do a lot by living off the land. You don't really need a lot of custom tools on most operating systems today to just be like, I just, because it doesn't need to do anything fancy. Like, I just need to access some files and send them to the internet. There's like so many ways to do that.
One of the arguments I make to people is like, say WinRAR, for example, or 7-Zip. They both have all of the characteristics of ransomware. So you can encrypt data, you can delete data, you can transfer data. What else do you need? I mean, you could argue that you can do all of those things basically with PowerShell as well, which you fundamentally can. But I mean, something like WinRAR, as I said, has all the characteristics of ransomware. Is it going to be blocked by your traditional detection-based tools? Probably not, because it's not inherently bad. Can it be used for bad purposes? Absolutely. Which again brings us back to why the idea of blocking all of these things by default makes so much sense.
Yeah, no, agreed. I want to talk about, you mentioned Configuration Manager. I want to talk about vulnerability management and patch management. Some people will say that VM vulnerability management is dead, that scanning it on the network. So actually it was HD Moore that was explaining his, because this is like his take. And I'm just like, I kind of agree with that. I like where you're going, right? And so the basic premise is the VM vendors have gotten really good at deploying agents to get you that vulnerability data. They have not put as much research and development into the network scanning piece. because they're very agent focused, and they've pivoted into a lot of different other areas in cybersecurity, kind of leaving behind that network scanner. And also, I believe that people scan their systems and they have thousands of vulnerabilities, and all they need to know is you need to go from version 1 to version 3. Like, don't even worry about what the 1,500 vulnerabilities in there that get fixed. Like, just tell me I need to go from version 1 to version 3. That's all. That's all I care about. I'm not, and then you're trying to prioritize all those vulnerabilities, and you're getting lost, no matter how you do it. So,
Yeah, I mean, look, I maybe saying it's dead is a little bit
oh, it's very
strong.
sensational, and it gets clicks and views, Rob. So,
Yeah, well, sorry. Okay, well, then it's fine. Go for it. Knock yourself out. But no, I mean, look, much like, and again, patch management is adjacent in this regard, but it's not to say that you shouldn't do these things. It's not to say that there's no value
right.
in them whatsoever.
But
There
you need patch
probably
management. Like, the patching is all that's what you need. Maybe not. Like, you
agreed.
need different stuff to identify any exposures or gaps or
But
vulnerabilities.
they to some extent they both have the same weakness. They both have the same problem, which is to scan your network, evaluate vulnerabilities. You need to know what all the vulnerabilities are.
Yeah. Well, you need to know what all your systems are first.
Well,
Yeah,
that too. But I mean, realistically, nobody knows what all the vulnerabilities are because not all the vulnerabilities have been announced. Not all of they haven't been discovered. First of all, they haven't been announced. Secondly, and leading on to patch management, in a lot of cases they haven't been patched yet. So there is an inherent problem with depending on this as a part of your cybersecurity. As I said, there's not to say there's not value. There's not to say
you still have to
vulnerabilities are.
You still have to do it right.
It is, but don't go to bed at night thinking all of my vulnerabilities or all my serious vulnerabilities are patched. Everything is going to be fine because realistically, it's not. It's not a strategy to keep yourself safe. It is part of a overall jigsaw of things which combined can keep yourself safe. But again, it has the same fundamental downfall that all detection has, which is you need to know in the case of vulnerability management, all of the vulnerabilities. In the case of detection and response, you need to know all of the bad things in order to be able to detect them and respond to them. Detection and response, nobody knows all the bad things. Vulnerability management, nobody knows of all the vulnerabilities. Again, known and unknown.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. It reminds me of the things that I've observed with patches and software just being patched in general, where you get into a lot of different scenarios. That basically the point of this is I gotta have something else that helps protect me because I can't scan and patch my way out of getting pwned, right? I need something else. And what's evident of that is vendors that are like, oh, here's a patch. There's no security fixes that are fixed in this patch until, oh, wait, oops, actually there was. And there was a vulnerability. We didn't tell you. So like if you're basing your remediation on whether or not there's a vulnerability, that is flawed. And that's the exception, not the rule. But also, how many times do we not figure that out and the attackers figure it out first?
Very, very much so. Very much so.
And then, the patch then breeds, could not work, first of all, right? Then someone could find a way around that patch, a slight variation of the exploit. We just went through this in my day job, right? Actually, the 2 pieces of research we did, there was basically just kind of tweak the exploit, and it worked against a new patch version. So there's that. There's patches that just flat out don't work, like don't even address it. But then there's also the other areas in the code that have that similar vulnerability that as soon as you patch one thing, first of all, attackers are doing the patch diff to go, where can I make my exploit, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many scenarios that this whole cycle that we've gone through with VM and patch management is something you need to do, obviously, but it still leaves so much exposure in your organization.
There's a very simple way to look at it, which is to assume everything is vulnerable. I mean, first and foremost, everything that you add, everything that you run, every different program that's on your computer makes you more vulnerable because there could be vulnerabilities in any of those things. So by limiting the amount of programs that people can run or that you can run, you're going to limit your exposure and you're going to limit the number of vulnerabilities there are. But my approach has always been with this is to assume software that you are using is vulnerable, to assume that it is full of holes and act accordingly.
Mm.
So I'm talking to you on Chrome right now. I have zero doubt that the version of Chrome that I'm running now has vulnerabilities in it. I mean, look at the cadence, the number of different updates that come out for a program like Chrome. I mean, it's frankly ridiculous. I mean,
I think when I updated, so I run Linux, right? And so I see what packages are being updated. They scroll across the screen. And I'm diligent about looking. Chrome is once or twice a week.
It's more than that. I mean, we one of the things we do as part of our allow listing is we've got this concept what are called built-in applications, which are basically definitions that we maintain, we monitor, we update when they update. So basically, our customers don't need to worry about manually allowing a new version of Chrome to run. But as part of that, those guys basically have schedules that they have to operate on for different pieces of software. I think their current check, and I could be wrong on this, but I think their current cadence of checking for Chrome is every 15 minutes.
Mm.
Because it is so prone
it's so
to being
important. Yeah.
Well, it's so important, number one, but it's also updated so frequently, and it can be, 1:00 in the morning, it can be 12:00 in the day, it can be basically any time of the day or night. Chrome, a new update or a new patch or a new fix for Chrome can be released. So again,
then you got to get the user to restart their browser, though.
Well, that's the whole other thing, and I know a few. There's probably a few tab hoarders out there that are.
I've got 6 windows each with 123 tabs open.
Yeah, there's no way I'm restarting my browser. So those people are a problem, obviously. But yeah, as I said, just assume everything is full of holes because it probably is. Assume it can be exploited because it probably can, and act accordingly. So protect yourself. So what's the next thing that happens when a vulnerability gets exploited? I mean, most cases it's something runs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you block everything from running, then that something can't run. Or it might be, there was a great vulnerability in Zoom a couple of years ago where basically Zoom was able to call PowerShell. Are you able to call PowerShell through Zoom? So, I mean, do those two things need to talk to each other? I mean, realistically not. So why would you let them talk to each other? So going back to the point from earlier about expanding that concept of default deny, you're expanding it to, well, I'm going to stop lateral movement across programs on my machine. I'm going to default deny anything from being able to run. So even when the invariably, vulnerable software on my machine gets exploited, well, block the next thing that happens.
Right. And do you have like templates that understand the valid use cases for programs to communicate? Because there are obviously valid reasons for programs to talk to each other. But are you saying those are fewer and far between?
So we have what we call effectively template policies for any new organization that deploys ThreatLocker. And they're what I would describe as one size fits most. They address the most commonly exploited weaknesses, shall we say. So it's going to stop things like Office from calling PowerShell. I mean, there's no good reason in 99.9% of environments for Office to be able to call PowerShell or command prompt or regserve or for files or any of those weaponizable dangerous Windows components, basically. So we're just
I feel like 50-60% of the malware out there doesn't run on your system now once you've applied that template. Like a pretty high percentage, right? A common everyday malware is probably
and again, it's stopping it before it can even happen, and that's the point. It's stopping it before it can, like that first thing, which is I click on a link in email, and then all of a sudden PowerShell is open and bad things are happening. If you stop it at that point, you're not depending on detecting whether or not that PowerShell is good or bad. Because I mean, again, that comes down to definitions and behaviors and heuristics, and if it's not recognized as being malicious, and it's probably going to be able to happen. I mean, I've seen other examples recently, like some of the they're actually getting quite clever with some of the, I don't know if you call it social engineering per se, but like things like, you have a problem with your computer, you can fix it by doing this. So you select this, go Control C, click on Start, click on Run, type it in, and off you go. I mean, it's hard to believe that people fall for this stuff, but they genuinely do. I've seen cases of where they do, where they try to run a, copy paste PowerShell, boom, and next minute malware is installed in their machine, or a reverse shell. It's so easy to do a reverse shell with PowerShell. It's not even funny. I've great chat conversations between myself and ChatGPT. So there's a really cool website called revshells.com.
Yeah, I think you're telling me about this. Yeah,
it's awesome. So basically just go to RevShells, tell it what you want to use, and it'll give you the code for a reverse shell. But I got the PowerShell reverse shell code from that, and I put it into a machine, and Windows Defender steps in and goes, "Hey, this is malware. It's known bad, so don't do this." So I went to ChatGPT and I said, "Look, can you obfuscate this for me, please?" And it gave me. We had a bit of back and forth, and I called it some names and so on and so forth. But at the end of which, it gave me obfuscated PowerShell code, which was a reverse shell. Doesn't get picked up by anything.
Mm-hmm.
Sails
it's
on
all
through.
It's all too common, right? That every day I see a new bypass technique, or at least if it's not new, it's a variation on an older technique that's been updated, right?
Yeah.
And just every week I see them. Every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's so easy. And the thing about things like LLMs is it lowers the barrier of entry in terms of skills. I mean, there once upon a time, there was a relatively small number of people worldwide who had the necessary skills, whether it be in C or Rust or whatever the case may be, to be able to write functional, undetectable malware. I mean, you're probably talking about maybe a couple of 100,000 people worldwide.
Yeah. I mean, most elite pen test teams had those people. I've chatted with them, interviewed them on the show before, and I mean, they spend the majority of their time basically figuring out, how do I write malware that's not going to be detected by anyone's EDR or anti-malware or whatever it is, right?
Well, unfortunately,
but now with an LLM, it can iterate, right? LLMs are good for some things, not for others, right? That's a whole other debate and segment on the podcast. Mm-hmm. But what it is good at is making multiple iterations of things that it knows about, and that's what you do.
It was incredible. I don't know if I ever told you the story that we were doing some work with a guy called Jacoby. Did I ever tell you the Jacoby story?
Mm-mm. Why don't you close us out with the Jacoby story?
Okay, I'll tell you the Jacoby story. So Jacoby, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, but he was Hack5's Hacker of the Year for years. Guy's an absolute genius.
Oh, he does a lot of hardware stuff?
Yes, a lot of well, he does a lot of PowerShell stuff as well.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of
I follow him. Yep.
Yes. Incredible. I mean, the guy's an absolute genius. And
he makes the hardware thing. What's it called? Marauder. He makes Marauder hardware. Is that the same guy or no?
I think so. No, I don't think so. But anyway, long story short, guy's an absolute genius. And he came up with this way of delivering polymorphic reverse shells to machines. So effectively, it's an API call, reaches out, gets a reverse shell down from the API, and it's different every time.
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And we did a webinar with him and David Bombal, and basically Jacoby was like, "Got this. This is how it works. This is what it does. Send a different key every time, get a different piece of malware, and it's completely undetectable." Tested it against every tool that's out there. Every single tool that's out there, I've tested it against. None of them have stopped it because it's polymorphic. It changes every time. They don't detect it. So we gave him an environment running ThreatLocker and said, "Look, have at it. See if it works here and see how you get on here." And we blocked it straight away. Now, he was convinced, Jacoby was convinced, and I think, to be honest, I think he still is today, because I'm not quite sure if he gets the simplicity of what we do, because he's looking at it as a really complex problem. You know what I mean? This is a really difficult thing for things like AVs and EDRs, etc., to work out. And we literally did it live on a podcast like this. And I said, "Look, Jacoby," he thought it was, we were figuring out what was happening. We were, heuristics and behavioral analysis and all this kind of stuff to go, "We know what you're doing." And I had to say to him, "Jacoby, no, it's really simple. We're just saying PowerShell can't reach out to the internet."
Right.
Nothing like, it's a really complex problem, but it's a really simple solution. So we don't need to know that you're up to no good to stop this thing from happening. We just need to have a rule in place that says, "Look, PowerShell can't reach out to the internet." And as I said, it's such a simple problem, or such a simple solution to such a complex and difficult problem. Right. But as I said, I thought it was a brilliant example of he had something that bypasses everything, but he couldn't bypass ThreatLocker because of a very simple control, which is this program can't reach out there. So you're stopped at the first.
I love it. That's awesome. It's great.
Really
great
cool.
use case,
really cool.
Great story. Yeah. Rob, I want to thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. Love chatting with you, man. I like that we covered a lot of ground and weaved our way through multiple topics. It was great.
Pleasure, Paul. Thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. Whenever we talk to security teams, one thing is clear. They are under more pressure than ever, facing increasingly complex and higher stakes threats. That's where Flashpoint comes in. Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions to keep their people and assets safe. Flashpoint combines cutting-edge technology with expert intelligence teams, empowering security leaders with the critical data and alerts and analysis needed to act before threats escalate. And with Ignite, Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform, you get access to real-time insights, finished intelligence, and analytics all in one place. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Flashpoint. You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why Run Zero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They got those covered too. Run Zero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVEs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focus on the risks that actually matter, not an endless sea of CVEs. Try it free. Visit securityweekly.com/Run Zero to get started. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 881, being recorded on Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Josh Marpet. Josh, welcome.
Hey, always up for talking about Meshtastic, man. Awesome.
It's fun. It's good stuff. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Good to be back. I feel like I haven't been here in a while, and even though we're having an abbreviated episode this time around, I'm here for the bourbon and cigar.
That's awesome. Yeah, this one's wicked short, as we say in Rhode Island.
Wicked
Mr. Larry, wicked short. Mr. Larry Pesce is here with us from a car show, ironically enough.
I am. Yeah,
He's actually coming to us through Meshtastic.
Yeah, not quite. But no, I didn't think we had a show this week, so we just made the decision we were going to come here. And while short show, I can do the show from the car show. So here we are.
Awesome. I'm assuming not many of the cars there are ones that you can hack into, right? They're more analog than most cars today.
There is either 2024 or 2025 Ford Bronco, so there might be one.
Gotcha.
Depends how you define hacking, Paul. I mean,
this is true.
There's coat hangers that used to be able to be used to break into older cars.
Right. There's the tennis ball trick, right, on the wafer lock.
Yep.
I saw a clip about that, which is kind of like does that really work? I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't, right? It's just a trope. It's a trope. I watched the video. I'm like, wait, I don't think that really works. A wafer lock set, on the other hand, universal wafer lock set like the one I have, works great. Let's see. So let's dig into it. Meshtastic. This is a relatively new thing. Mm-hmm. The LoRa protocol was like in 2012-ish timeframe when it was developed, and then for like a while, like 8 years or so, you didn't hear much about it, right? Until, according to my sources, Kevin Hester in early 2020 created Meshtastic, which actually stands for like a way to make mesh networking fantastic, was his approach to it. And it was to use the LoRa protocol and actually make it usable for people to create devices and be able to communicate over the protocol. So we needed like a standard firmware, standard mesh networking things in order to be able to talk to each other. And that was the goal of Meshtastic. It's been used by all kinds of preppers, hackers, DIY. I mean, you name it. It's got a lot of different use cases for off-grid encrypted communications. How's that to kick us off?
Sounds like a whole lot of new that's kind of old, but let's see how the conversation goes.
Well, certainly, Jeff, to your point, there are a lot of RF frequencies and protocols that run on those frequencies that accomplish the same thing as what I said. They allow communication off-grid and it's encrypted, right?
I'll try to dust off my signals intelligence knowledge, what I had 30, 40 years ago.
Right. So obviously U.S. military and, government has their proprietary protocols and gear that we don't get to hear much about for obvious national security reasons, right? We just kind of get
Well, and then you
snippets
have
of that.
number stations that broadcast over entire hemispheres of the Earth.
Right, that's
Kind of
crazy
sounds
too.
long range to me.
I thought that was aliens, but okay.
That's a different topic.
Aliens, man.
Aliens.
So this project is open source, and Meshtastic has done an amazing job of, especially recently, the latest firmware, the 2610 series of firmware is absolutely amazing. In fact, I have a camera on some of my gear just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So if I turn that on, the camera's going to get really mad at me.
It's going to get all autofocusy on you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
really.
going to get all out of focusy. But eventually,
wait,
there to see, and then Meshtastic is booting up, and it's
So
going out
Larry
of
should
focus 'cause the
unmute
screen-
while we're waiting for the autofocus, so we have the music to entertain it.
Yeah,
So
right.
wait a second, guys. We really need to talk about frequencies for a minute, because
Yeah.
there are multiple frequency bands, and they are geographically based. So if you're in the US, it's 915, I think.
915 for the US, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and what is CA? What is CA for a country? What is CA for a country?
Canada.
Canada. Thank you. I had a mental blank there because I would thought California. Like, wait, that's not a country.
Well,
What
that's
is
because
going on?
we're either about to annex them or go to war with them. One
Oh,
of the two.
stop. Dear God, that's just theater. But is that ISM? Is that an unlicensed band? Industrial Scientific Band?
Yes,
Okay,
it
so
is.
that's an unlicensed band, so anybody can use it. You don't need a license to use it, and it's fine. And it's the same way that Wi-Fi is an unlicensed bands, right?
Yeah. So, important note: when you buy gear, make sure you buy the gear with the radio for the country that you're in. Europe is 868 and 433 megahertz. China's 470 megahertz. That might not be completely accurate, so just make sure you double check that. 915 is definitely the one for the US. So when you buy gear, you'll typically see like a little pull down menu, like on LilyGo's website.
What I was
and you
going to
select
ask,
that.
it's 915 megahertz is what we're talking.
Yes,
Megahertz,
yes.
Okay.
It's all sub gigahertz.
Yeah, which is
Everything
interesting.
is sub-gigahertz.
433 megahertz is also ISM band here in the US. So
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't have 433 here as well. There must be some subtlety to it about where in the band that they use.
Probably just for standardization, just to be able to use it, so that everybody can find everybody else. But you could run, I mean, if 433 is unlicensed, you could buy 433 megahertz LoRaWAN Meshtastic stuff and use it here, couldn't you?
I can't help but saying to Larry, what goes up must come down.
And just as long as it's not your Meshtastic that goes down, you're all good.
Right. Like this one just keeps turning off, and it has full battery too. I don't know what's going on with it.
So,
Oh,
okay,
no,
so
there it is. You know what? I think it's just
Maybe-
going to sleep. I think it's
I was
just
going
going
to
to
say,
sleep.
maybe it's conserving the battery.
Yeah.
where did you get that BlackBerry, Crackberry looking Meshtastic device? Do you remember?
Oh, so this is a LilyGo T-Deck Pro.
Okay.
So there's a regular LilyGo T-Deck that you have to 3D print a case, which I didn't have one here. That's at home. I 3D print a case and I have the board. I just haven't put it all together. And then I bought the Pro, which comes with the case. And then you just mod the case to put the external antenna in. So you just there's already like a cutout. I don't know if I described this on the show before. There's a cutout. You get like an X-Acto knife and a little rotary tool, bore out the hole, and then and this was just one that, I don't know, I was just searching around on the internet and I got an antenna. That's what the antenna looks like. And Larry, you said this before to me, and I don't pretend to understand the physics behind it, but your antenna has to be, or should be, should be manufactured for the RF band or frequency that you're receiving and transmitting in. That's true, correct?
That is correct. Yeah. On transmit, it is more. It is important because you can burn out your radio otherwise. Receive can be random length, but it's just nowhere near as efficient, or it's not going to get your data as well.
Right. We'll just call it physics for now, since it's a shortened segment this week.
Holy crap, they have an e-paper one? Oh my God, the LilyGo's going crazy with these things, man.
Yes, they do have an e-paper one.
Jeez.
And there's lots of devices that so also sitting here in my camera that keeps going out of focus, right? That's the LilyGo T-Deck. So that takes a battery. and I have a case for that one. But this one, I didn't get the screen pre-installed, so I have to solder the screen on. I didn't have a chance to do that before the show. But I do have all the other components to put that together in a really cool red case, which is not an arm's reach, but that is the T-Deck. And then, of course, you've got the Heltec V3 right there, which is going out of focus. And this is a case that it was on Maker World just to 3D print. It has the little buttons on it and such. I don't have the screw in this one. It's just kind of hanging there, but I put it here for display purposes. The nice part is you get the reboot and the bootloader buttons. Have this like little orange thing on there, so you can still access them, as well as a little screen. This one does not have a battery, so I'd have to plug it in to enable it. And then the screen is just very basic information. And then you have to use the app on your phone to interface with it over Bluetooth. So make sure if you buy a Meshtastic gear, that you get one with Bluetooth so you can connect your phone to it as well. But the new Meshtastic that's running on my T-Deck Pro is the new version, which has the interface on it. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of hard to see, but it has the interface on it that you can do all the things from the interface.
Yeah,
So for the very old... I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So, I installed one with the interface on it the other day. Oh, man, it's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, it's huge success, I think.
Okay, Jeff, what's your question?
So my old boomer question, rocking on my front porch, get off my lawn, is
Old man yelling at cloud. There we go.
what are you guys? I mean, it looks like a little walkie-talkie. Are you guys using this for voice communications, text type of communications, or a way to enable internet TCP type communications?
I know you don't know this, Jeff, but it's TCP/IP. But anyway, so
what did I say? I meant to say TCP.
You said TCP.
TCP. So I slurred the TCP/IP.
Yeah, it's okay. We don't.
What does it stand for?
Transmission Control Protocol,
Internet Protocol.
Okay. Sorry, man. Well, okay. So what these are used for is actually pretty simple. They were originally designed to be used for long-range, low-bandwidth communications for telemetry, IoT devices, status reports, telemetry style stuff. What we're using them for now is primarily textual, but ad hoc messaging. So think of it as a instant messenger box in a way. Okay. There are people using it in a tactical sense as an off-grid, off-cell tower methodology to send information from the ATAK, which is the Android Tactical Awareness Kit, if I remember correctly, ATAK, and they've got it rigged up so that you can use an Android phone with a Meshtastic node, like either of the two on the sides of the T-Deck there. Mm-hmm. And so you can, without a cell tower, without a local SIM card, without anything, you have your own little node that travels with your tactical unit. And you can send photographs, albeit lower resolution, slower, but it's still useful. And you can send messages, move left, move right, 3 guys up ahead, whatever type of thing. So it's also useful for direction finding to another unit. For example, at the last ShmooCon, the final Shmoo.
Yeah, it was great. We're all chatting via Meshtastic at the final ShmooCon.
In the depths of the Washington Hilton, where you get very little cell signal most of the time. Mm-hmm. And it seems random. I swear to God, they turn the towers off and on just for funsies at those things. But the Meshtastic was ultra freaking reliable. So we had a hacker chat channel, and I could find my wife because she was holding one, I was holding one, and it would tell me she's 50 feet to your right or whatever. I turn right, there she is. Oh, great, cool. Nice. That kind of thing. So it's really useful for a lot of situations. But it's everything it is a compromise, but it's a really cool compromise.
And I tell you what, if we like our gadgets, and if you want gadgets, so this is the Meshtastic web flasher, which I highly recommend, by the way, to use the web flasher. As much as I cringe security and supply chain wise with the web flasher, it really is super easy and makes the installation and technology available to a wider audience. So you don't doing it the other ways is a lot more technical and can present challenges. The web flasher is pretty straightforward. I did the Heltec V3, which is right here earlier today, and the V3. So one of the things you're going to run into when you flash these devices with the firmware is you got to get into bootloader mode.
Right.
Bootloader mode opens up a USB TTY connection to your computer that then allows you to send commands to write data over the SPI flash on these and overwrite the firmware on them and
It's as
update the
close to
firmware on
OTA
them.
flashing as you can get. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And so the button, I think, if this button right here, it's on it depends on which way you're looking at it, right? But if the power USB port is facing you, I believe it's the button to the left is the boot button. So while it's plugged in, all I had to do was tap that button and it flipped into bootloader mode. Now, those of you that have worked with ESP32s before, some of the boards are different. You got to do the dance. So you got to hold the power button, the one of the buttons down, plug it in, and then press the other button and then release both buttons, and that puts it in bootloader mode. So bootloader in the T-Deck Pro has a different process that I can't even remember how to put them in bootloader mode. Like I need to create a cheat sheet for like every device, how to put it in bootloader mode to get it to flash the firmware, because I always have to look it up. But once you figure that out, you go to this website, and then it's flasher.meshtastic.org. And you choose the device that you want and go through the flashing process. Now, there's a lot of hardware available and supported by Meshtastic. And just looking at this screen will probably, I apologize in advance, trigger some people to go on a shopping spree. The good news is most of these devices are not overly expensive. I think we were talking offline off the podcast about my Heltec V3s that I think, what I say, I got 2 of them with antennas for $44 or something like that on Amazon. Just so about $20 a piece.
Wait, for the antennas or for the Heltec?
For the Heltec V3 with antenna.
No,
Just the
what, are
board.
that cheap?
Yeah.
Jesus. No wonder I was going to ask, like, what's so special about the Heltec? I don't know it.
Yeah.
And like, that's dirt. Like, you'd throw them in every backpack I own, for God's sakes. Like, that's just a nothing.
And you can see some of them are based on an ESP32 and some are based on the NRF 52840, which is kind of a similar chip. One could say it just, it's again firmware based little SOC device that the Meshtastic folks say is better. I think they say that the NRF 52840 devices, like these ones from Rack, this repeater and stuff like that, are actually better at handling the protocol than some of the ESP32s. But I've had great luck with all the ones that I've flashed.
So
Does anyone
like,
have different ones on here?
I have a couple of the T edges, T echoes. Sorry, I have some T echoes. They're embedded in my car right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see the T Echo.
They're older.
Oh, so that's not an ESP32. That's a 52840.
Oh, is it? Okay. That was older. I got that probably 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a pair of them because I was trying to work with a friend of mine to get ATAC and Meshtastic to work together. And I was like, look, with the current Meshtastic hardware, it just isn't going to work. But they upgraded the hardware, and then somebody tried it again, and it worked beautifully.
Nice.
Oh,
it's supported on the T Watch. So LilyGo makes a watch that has an ESP32 S3 in it. And it's supported by
Larry's
Meshtastic.
buying a new watch now. So
this is awesome. It's pretty awesome.
Well, look, he's like, I could use another watch.
Yeah, well, who couldn't use another watch?
What's a watch?
I think that the idea here is that these are great for off grid. These are great for private messaging. But there is some encryption on the messaging, but I don't know how much it is. I haven't actually looked into that.
Well, there was just a vulnerability.
How are people hacking these, and what's the nature of the encryption?
So, but they messed up on the entropy of the key, one of the keys that is used to encrypt or the entropy algorithm that's used to derive the keys had some flaw. I didn't dig deep into that flaw.
Yeah, you had me at derived.
Yeah.
So are they using some sort of public key architecture for the initial handshake?
It says messages are AES 256 encrypted.
Well, that's solid. I mean, if it's done properly, that's about as solid as it gets.
But I would guess there's still, like a web connection. There's still some sort of handshake that probably goes on.
Asymmetric keying to get to the AES-256 static key, or symmetric key. So you've got to do some sort of TLS or similar.
It says only radios you specify are able to read your messages.
So you have a Meshtastic key signing party?
I'm not sure how it works.
No, because you don't, because I've done it with on the fly. Like, oh,
Okay.
look, there's a radio near me. Oh, it's his. Cool. Allow him to read my messages. So there's no key signing back and forth. So there's still got to be some TLS in there of some sort.
There's something going on there.
It's a TLS like exchange with a public and private certificate.
Okay, it is. I love how you say TLS like. That means it's not actually TLS. So one would potentially surmise that they're using a proprietary version of TLS, which proprietary encryption to me is dangerous.
Well, this is coming from an LLM, but it says it uses AES 256 CTR encryption for the payload of each packet. Each channel group has its own symmetric key, which must be shared among all participating devices. The key is typically derived from the channel name or set explicitly by the user.
Right, and that's what's typically exchanged using a public-private TLS type of exchange.
Direct messages use public key cryptography, which makes sense. You'd do a key exchange for a direct message.
But for the AES 256 to work, each side has to have the key.
Correct.
And it's got to get to each side somehow. So the entropy vulnerability you said that was just published probably has to do with deriving what I would call a session key.
Right.
You know, the AES 256 key that's
which
used for the
communication
session.
6, yeah.
Okay.
You do a public-private pair key exchange or derivation actually of the AES 256 symmetric key to then stream block and stream ciphers back, ciphertext back and forth, so that you can do this on a symmetric basis, which is so much fucking faster. It's ridiculous.
But being a mesh network, you need just regular nodes, not because there's two different types, right? There's a regular node that's used to communicate on, and then there are also repeater nodes. Is that true?
There are. Okay, so this is interesting about Meshtastic. A repeater node is nothing more than flipping a configuration bit.
Okay.
It is exactly the same firmware. It is exactly the same everything.
Mm-hmm.
All it does is say, "Oh, I'm I think it's called a gateway node." I don't think they call it repeater nodes.
Okay.
But it basically, it's exactly the same firmware. You don't have to flip. You don't have to change the firmware or anything, and you can make any Meshtastic node a repeater node. Obviously, it's slower if it has only one radio. There are purpose-built repeaters that have two radios, in one, out the other. But that's how I understand it. If I'm wrong, somebody let me know. But
I'm hearing half duplex, full duplex.
Yes,
you're hearing absolutely correctly half duplex and full duplex. If you use your basic one antenna, one radio Meshtastic node, it can receive and then send. If you have a purpose-built repeater, it can receive and send at the same time. Exactly correct.
And for those that are not familiar, if you're not familiar with half duplex, you're probably not familiar with a walkie-talkie. But push to talk, you let go, you listen. That's half duplex. And it's funny because when you were describing these things earlier, I'm like, it's kind of like a glorified walkie-talkie. And it is kind of like a glorified walkie-talkie.
What's the difference between simplex and half duplex?
If only I had an AI handy, I could ask the question. I don't remember off the top of my head. I wouldn't do that. But
okay.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
All right. So let's see if Larry knows. Let's bother Larry and see if he knows. Hey, Larry, do you know what the difference between simplex and half duplex is?
Is simplex more like a broadcast?
Simplex is I send and I don't expect to receive until I let go of the transmission key. And it's effectively the same as half duplex as I understand it. I'm probably wrong, but it's effectively I send and I don't think I'm going to get an answer back. It's almost like UDP.
Okay, so it's like a bat signal,
like a broadcast, like you said. Yeah,
it's a broadcast. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so these TDECs are making a big popularity thing on the hacker scene because this frequency range is also very akin and uses very similar sort of pieces to things like Z-Wave and Zigbee and all these little niche frequencies that we've been working with over the last few years. And it's kind of fun that we can have this one and not have to use a device that's a machine identity. We can have our own things that we can communicate over this frequency range and this protocol. And it's kind of cool to have private messaging.
So LoRa, that's short for long range, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So what is
wireless.
the effective long range of the device, in the middle
it's
there?
not that long. It's only like 1,000 kilometers.
Okay. So
between nodes, the
why
more
call it
nodes
long?
you can link nodes up to 1,000 kilometers together between 2 points. Is that what you're saying, Josh?
No, they actually have a single node to single node of 1,000 kilometers. I mean, this is a big, but yeah, it's very long range.
Right. So it is long range, but also you're going to have multiple nodes in there too.
Yeah.
Well, it's long range compared to like Bluetooth
5G.
or
it's long range compared to 5G.
Okay. Yeah. It's
5G
somewhere between. So LoRa, depending on environment, is between 2 and 8 kilometers.
Well, what's 5G? Do you know, Larry, off the top of your head?
I don't.
But I mean, they had to build so many more 5G towers because it was such a shorter range than 4G and 4G LTE. So like it's really pretty frigging good range.
Okay. Well, again, I'm going back 40 years to, long range being entire hemispheres of the planet.
It's not shortwave.
It's not
shortwave. It is. I mean, what's the frequency range for shortwave?
I don't know, but I was going to ask. I can't think of which conferences off the top of my head that they'll have like a ham radio exam offered. I feel like ShmooCon used to do that.
Besides Delaware does it.
Maybe CipherCon, but I wonder if Meshtastic is really catching on with the people that are in the ham radio space. It seems like a natural extension.
Okay, so shortwave radio is 3 to 30 megahertz. The shortest, the shorter the wave, the longer the range, and the lower the bandwidth.
Yep.
So the lower the amount of information you can pass over it. LoRaWAN is 915, so it's still sub gigahertz, but it's right at the top of sub gigahertz, unless the 433 stuff. But
how does that compare to VHF and UHF?
So shortwave is actually HF,
right?
High frequency,
which is below VHF, I think.
That's correct. So VHF frequency range. VHF is 30 to 300.
So people like me that grew up on network television that was broadcast VHF, and I happen to live north of Washington, D.C., and could pick up DC channels as well as Baltimore channels, although they were a little bit fuzzier. So the range of VHF was probably effectively 20, 30 miles. UHF, I think, is a little bit more.
We used to have those remember the giant antennas you put on your roof, and
with the little knob on the inside,
and it was a motor
thing.
Yeah, it was a motor to turn the antenna, and it ran a cable down. You had a knob, and you could turn the antenna on the top of your house. I actually forgot about that.
My grandfather had one of those, and he lived in a row house, and I used to spin the dial as far as I could and then run out the back door and run all the way down to the end of the yard to try to look up and see if I could still see the antenna moving.
Nice.
You were really bored when you were a kid, weren't you?
I was.
Well, we didn't have the internet back then.
That was kind of cool.
This is true.
And then right after that, you would take a wheel and or a hoop and push it down the street with a stick.
That's right. With a stick.
With a stick.
Oh, God.
Now, in contrast, when my son was a teenager, now he was younger than that. He was probably 7 or 8 years old. I came home from work one day and he told me the TV was broken. And so I walked over to the TV and I turned it on and I changed the channels. And he picked up the remote and said, "No, Dad, it's broken," because the remote wasn't working. And that's where I proceeded to tell him, when I was a kid, we had to walk across the room through snow to twist a dial and spin a dial just to get the channel to come in nicely. I digress.
How old did you feel when you did that to him?
Pretty old.
Yeah.
But for the love of God, put a new battery in the remote. Voila.
The
TV is fixed.
broken. Jesus
TVS
Christ, on a stick. Okay, so go ahead.
So speaking of broken, real quick, Paul, I think one of the things that I'd really like to see just in the community is to get a lot more folks to adopt it. I was doing some looking last night after I updated my my device that I did that we need to get more people in the community because there's like nobody around us. Like mine here at the car show, and it's one of one.
Right.
So we need some better nodes.
Yeah, we need people to have the devices to communicate, but also have more of the, what did you call those, Josh? I called them repeaters, but they're not repeaters.
It's close enough. It's repeaters. Yeah.
Yeah. So Larry and I were talking about putting one here in the studio to have a repeater and trying to build out the mesh network so we can communicate.
So I'll put out a challenge to whatever conference wants to take this up. Is there a day when Meshtastic will be built into the electronic badges that are issued to attendees?
It's probably a bit expensive. I think the cheapest.
I don't know what the cheapest one is. You could probably find one that would go on a badge.
How much? What do you think the cheapest Meshtastic node is?
This one from Seed Studio is, I don't think that expensive, but this one also looks like it has 2 antennas on it, which is interesting. But the Seed Studio stuff is usually pretty cheap. I mean, if it just runs on an ESP32, that's cheap to start with. So,
oh yeah, that's $13. That's not horrible.
I mean, what's the going price? I mean, I've seen some pretty elaborate electronic badges in my day. I was at SecretCon in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago. Same people that put on CypherCon in Milwaukee, electronic badge, and
the ones that they build that way are either sold or your admission ticket covers the price of it.
Well, right. I mean, they have a cost. Yes, it might go into the admission price, but I imagine there's a fair amount of money sometimes invested in some of these electronic badges that I've seen.
But I like the electronic badge idea, Jeff, that has the LoRa radio in it, because now you're just enabling a whole bunch of people that have these devices now, right? Yep. Kind of just enabling the.
Well, if for no other reason than to just get people exposed to it to try it,
yeah,
and whet their appetite.
And if anybody wants some ideas for one of those badges, I've got a great idea that I'd love to talk to somebody about.
Nice.
And I just need some help executing. And that really go TDEC variety would be quite amazing.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion about Meshtastic, and that will conclude.
It's been a Meshtastic discussion about Meshtastic.
I'm just going to guess. I'm going to guess that the interview ran first because it was pre-recorded, and this is the second segment, which means thanks everyone for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and out.